So, hello, anyway. Hello. I've been doing animation and other kinds of moving images for 38 years now, so it's been a while. And there's been quite a lot of different things I've been doing. I know lately that people mostly would expect to see animated documentaries from me. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I did actually a very good talk about animated documentaries, but I already did the same talk twice, once in Croatia and once in the Czech Republic, so I thought it might be a bad thing to do the same talk in the middle between these countries. I'm assuming there might be a few people who have heard that already, but we'll get into that subject as well. So just as an introduction, I'll show a little clip from one of the animated documentaries I did, and then we'll go back and talk a bit about older stuff, or early stuff, if you will. So here's a little clip from a film called Lies, and you can see the whole film tonight.
Socialtjänsteman som faktiskt tröttnade. Han tog mig enskilt och sa, kan vi gå och fika någon gång? Och så okej, är du så sjuk? Då sätter vi in dig på ett hem för psykiskt sjuka, och jag blev livrädd. Och så sa han, jag vet att du knarkar och det är dags för dig att bli vuxen. Jag köper inte det här längre. Och jag blev helt rasande. Jag tror att jag hällde den där kaffekoppen och bara sprang ut därifrån. Men det var typ relationen för mitt liv. Alltså att jag förstod att jag kan hålla på och ljuga och låtsas vara någon annan som jag inte är. Och då lyckades jag efter 3:e gången avgifta mig själv. Det var svårt att sluta knarka, men det var mycket svårare att bli ärlig. Och på något sätt är det väl så att jag söker mig själv fortfarande vem jag är. Att jag inte får ihop en egen historia på något vis.
Yeah, so that's just to start with something that feels a little bit more typical of what I've been doing recently. But let's go back to, I guess, what Igor was talking about. For many years I had a company together with some other animators and directors, and the company was called FilmTecknarna. And we really started out doing animation when we were still in school, actually when we were kids even. A couple of friends and me did some animation. Then I sort of got a bit more interested in, well, you know, drinking and girls and music and stuff like that. But I kept in touch with those guys, and they met some other people that were also into animation. And I think we found, when we were later in our late teens, that we had a shared interest in animation, but also an interest in maybe telling stories through animation that weren't normally told through that medium. And at that time we hadn't really been to any festivals, we didn't know much about international animation, etc. So pretty much what we started out was trying to do kind of Disney-like films, but with subjects that felt relevant to us. And we made a few films that went around festivals, etc., and we kind of realized that, okay, animation can be so many things. It's not just, you know, Disney or whatever you had seen on television as kids. So apart from starting to move in different directions story-wise, we also started to move in other directions in terms of the kind of animation, etc., that we were doing. And I guess one example, I just show a little clip from that film. Maybe many of you saw it anyway on the opening night. But Revolver was kind of in a way, a revelation for us, because we did something where we didn't really base it on something we had seen. We just had an idea that we wanted to do, and made that film based on that concept. So just let's have a look at that, and we can talk a little bit about how that came about. So this is just a short clip from the film Revolver. Yeah, there's a lot of laughs in that film. So what we had done before was really, we started out really trying to get into the business of animation by doing things that we thought everyone else was doing. So we started out finding a children's book that we liked and applied for money to make a film out of that. And we were lucky because the commissioner at the Film Institute at the time had just read all the books by that author, and she was like, oh yeah, I've been trying to find someone to make a film out of that. And the second film we made, it was really the same story. Like, we figured we'll find a comic book artist and maybe ask him to write something for us. And same story, like the commissioner had just contacted him to see if he was interested to do something for film. So we were sort of lucky to find the right kind of things, but it still wasn't really something that we had come up with ourselves or was really straight from our heads or hearts or minds in that sense. So we went on to do another film which was more ambitious, where we wrote the script, etc., called Exit, which was a very long short film. It was like 25 minutes and quite ambitious in terms of lots of good voice actors and really a very straight narrative. And we felt we were kind of, yeah, this is all going really well. We're doing animation that looks like animation we had seen, but somehow we were dissatisfied. And I guess this film, Revolver, was maybe an attempt to just drop all the kind of the stuff that we had seen, the stuff that had inspired us to begin with, and just do something which was more of an experiment. We had worked a lot with, you work with loops and stuff to save time when you animate, and sometimes it works, sometimes it just becomes really weird when you do that. And we thought, well, maybe we can use this as sort of a concept for how the film can actually be, because if you repeat the loop too many times in your animation, it either becomes funny or, even worse, scary. If you have a character that just keeps doing the same thing, it's uncanny in some way. And we thought, well, it might be a great device to actually use the loop and what it does to the animation as the concept for a whole film. We also had an idea that we wanted to make a film in a much more improvised way, because we were a group of people directing together. The films we did, there were like 2, 3, or 4 directors on the same film, and there were different ways of working together. Some worked well, some worked less well, and we thought, okay, maybe a freer way of working, just starting with a few shots, actually these 2 shots that you saw here, and then taking that as a starting point and adding something new to the theme for each new scene we made. So it's really like trying to make a film in the same way you write music or improvise music. You start with a theme, then you develop that theme, maybe a new theme comes in and they interact. So it was an experiment for us, and I guess that it brought us into another world of animation in terms of it did really well at festivals, etc. But maybe to me it still felt like we're still trying to do animation that is somehow like taking its starting point in animation rather than somewhere else. So at the pace that we were maybe growing apart a bit as a group, we also started directing things on our own, and I think my work took maybe a different turning point. And we'll get into all that with the animated documentary and stuff later. But we also did a lot of other things. We really did a lot of commercials and that kind of work. It's, as you probably know, short films aren't always the best way to support yourself and your family. So we did a lot of other work that was more economically feasible. And I found that it was also kind of interesting. When you work for a long time on a short film, you find that doing a commercial for a month or so is actually quite liberating, and also it's not got your name stamped all over it, so you can be a bit freer and experiment a bit more. So I think, in a sense, for me, that's been liberating. So I thought we might look at a few commercials as well, because this is stuff you won't see in the program this evening. So just shows maybe a little different picture. We started out so long ago with our studio, so there was actually no commercial television at all when we started out. So we kind of grew together with the commercial industry. So when commercial television started in the 80s in Sweden, there was not much experts in any field. So we found ourselves not only doing animation, but we were doing like making props and making visual effects or special effects on set, or being puppeteers or whatever. So it was quite a learning experience as well, just being thrown into a world where it could be live action, it could be suddenly someone asked you to make a puppet to do something, or hang something on wires and do stuff. So I think we learned a lot from doing that, and I think that also maybe brought us even further away from where we started out in traditional animation. Well, I'll show you a couple of commercial things just to give some examples, and some are more glamorous, and there's one that's a bit more topical, and I can tell you a bit about the different projects when we've seen them.
Det här var den enda bilden jag hade på dig. I 7 års tid har den påmint mig om dagen du försvann. Och i 7 års tid har den fått mig att hoppas att vi en dag ska ses igen.
Varje dag splittras familjer på grund av krig och katastrofer. Varje dag kämpar vi för att återförena dem.
Yeah, so that's slightly different from Revolver, I guess, in some ways. And I guess what doing commercials might give you is a chance to, it's really giving you a lot of toys to play around with. In the case of these makeup store commercials, it's a lot to do with just getting to play with the best people in terms of makeup and hairstyling and fashion, etc. And it also, I guess, can give you, sometimes there is creative freedom, sometimes there's not. In this case, in terms of the makeup store things, we didn't have an advertising agency between us and the client. Normally you would have a client, then they go to the advertising agency, and then they come to you as a production company and you pitch an idea based on their ideas. Here we had the client contact us directly based on some music videos I'd made, and the films are really based not so much on creative concepts, but on their actual marketing plan. And we made these for 4 seasons, 4 years, and everybody who sees them are kind of, yeah, you must have been smoking something when you made these, and where do the ideas come from? But they're actually very much based on big thick documents of marketing plans, and then trying to translate that into some sort of entertaining vision that can capture the viewer. And these, I think, worked in terms of in terms of the actual marketing purpose of them. I think they gave a good brand awareness, etc., whatever they measure for these, and hopefully they can be entertaining to the audience as well. And in the case of the Red Cross one, obviously that's not really a commercial as such, but it was produced pretty much in the same way. You have a client, they have something they want to convey, and you try to tell a story for them. And in a sense, I guess, apart from the fact that when you make your own personal film, you kind of set the goals yourself, you set the concept or the story yourself. The thinking is pretty much the same whether you make a commercial or a music video or your own personal film, in terms of where you go from when the concept is actually formed until you have the final picture. So I think doing stuff, going between these different worlds, I think can teach you something that always is applicable in the other world as well. You learn something from commercials that you can use on your own work, but also the other way around, obviously. You can experiment in your own work and someone sees that and wants you to make a commercial out of it, etc. So another field of commissioned, or if you will, slightly commercial productions is music videos. And that's something I got into quite late in my career. So I was pretty old already when people started to ask me to do music videos. I'd really not thought that I would be. I'm not a very competitive person, so I never thought I, could make my way in such a competitive business. But we'd made a few things for Cartoon Network that were kind of parodies of music videos, and the people I worked with in England felt like, well, we should show these to record companies and maybe they will want you to make a video out of it. And we got actually quite a few jobs out of that. So I suddenly found myself being this old animator back home with kids and stuff to take care of, and then going to London now and then to be this young, promising music video director, which is something I can recommend if you're getting into your, 40-year crisis or something. Just become a music video director and it's going to help you a lot. So we're going to see tonight, we're going to see some music videos. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to show another one here. And we can talk a bit about the thinking behind that afterwards as well. This is a video for a UK artist or group called Goldfrapp, and the song is called Strict Machine. Yeah, So that's again a very different world to dive into. For me, as being a very, I think, by nature quite a shy person, I think I found it really helpful being thrown into this world where you meet a lot of difficult people, and you have, usually these are one-day shoots, and you have to capture a lot of material, and you have people who might start taking drugs or have some sort of fit of rage or something during the day, or just disappear during the day. So for me, I found that quite refreshing in relation to how you normally work in animation, where people have like a slow year-long breakdown or something, and you have to deal with this in a very slow way. Here it's a very direct kind of, you need to react, you need to be sure to capture all your material and to capture the personality of the artist, etc., in a very short time. Since I came quite lately to music videos, or late in my life, I had already done commercials, I'd done short films, etc. Normally, maybe young directors might start in music videos and go somewhere else, so they tend to want to make the video into a short film or a showcase or something they might want to do in another format. To me, it felt like more kind of indulging in maybe an interest in the music, and not the music only, but all the parts of that I feel kind of constitute the art form of contemporary popular music, which is not only the music, but the fashion, the attitude of the artist, etc., and the videos being just one part of that. So to me, it's been fun just playing with kind of cultural codes, etc. And for example, with this video, I felt, for one thing, I felt this is quite a hypnotic track in how it develops and how the rhythm works, etc. So I felt like a kaleidoscopic approach would somehow visually represent that. Also, there's kind of to me, this song has elements that are both. They're going back to both glam rock of the 70s and maybe disco of the 70s. So there are elements of that, both in how we styled her and how we go about the visuals. And then obviously every artist has their own world kind of surrounding them. So the animal heads and stuff was stuff that they had already used for album covers, etc. So I felt that should be a part of this as well. So in most cases when making videos, I think it's been about, for one thing, finding what visually and motion-wise maybe defines the song, but also making sure you stay within the world of the artist. And maybe you're telling a story, maybe not. I think in most cases you tell the story of their music somehow, and it could be through references to visuals that you would associate with other kinds of music that you feel like is part of the package the artist brings, or it could be a real story kind of told within the video. But I've mostly done videos that are really based on the artist's performance. So that's some things I've been doing, but obviously what people seem to associate me with is the animated documentary. And that's a subject I can speak for hours about, so someone has to stop me at some point, whether it's you or some of the organizers, I don't know. Oh, sorry? 15 minutes. Okay, yeah. We'll try. And again, I started to say before we got into all this commercial stuff that we as a group, when we work together, but also me personally, we've sort of been moving slowly from a very traditional animation, traditional 2D animation, working with other techniques, developing our stories from hopefully finding inspiration outside the world of animation, etc. So it's really, for me, it's been like a long goodbye to Mickey Mouse, really, to put it slightly poetically. And I think my move into the kind of more documentary animation is part of that journey as well. I think around the turn of the millennium, I was getting slightly disenchanted with the whole world of animation, really. I'm sorry to be saying that at an animation festival, but all the, like the big Hollywood features that came out at the time, they were usually like parodies of other films, like you had something like Shrek or something, which is really only referencing other films. There's nothing outside that world. And I could feel like maybe a lot of the stuff you saw at festivals, the independent animation, also seemed to be moving a bit within its own kind of world. So to me, it felt like, and this was my first instinct in terms of animated documentary, and my first kind of justification of the combination of animation and documentary. And I've come to change my beliefs many times why you make animated documentaries. So hopefully we have time to go through some of the reasons at least. But anyway, first I felt, yeah, I want to open the window to let some air in or some reality in, if there is such a thing. And I started to think about what can I do. And I had done one film which was kind of a combination of different short episodes on the same subject before. So I thought maybe combine these two ideas. Find something, some event in people's lives that are common to most people and collect some different stories about that event and put that into a film and see how those stories affect each other. And I was thinking, what could the subject be? What's kind of common to most people, that an experience we all had or hope or we're going to have? And I thought about the first time you have sex, because it's a very defining experience in terms of most people would measure their lives like before and after that, even before you actually have had the go at it. It's still like you probably expect to do it at some point. So I thought that's a great subject. So we collected some stories and we made a film called Never Like the First Time. So we're going to see one of the stories from that film, but you can see the whole film later tonight.
Man kan själv göra väldigt många upplevelser till minnen att komma ihåg. Det beror helt och hållet på en själv vad man gör av det. Vi träffades på studentkår och hon berättade då ingående om hur hennes inakkorism gestaltade sig. Och detta kan jag oerhört ointressant. Däremot så ändrades mitt intresse när hon plötsligt sa: det vore väldigt roligt att se hur ditt inackorderingsrum ser ut. Ja, så ja, men det kan du väl få. Och vi gick in och jag hade en väldigt kul med inackorderingsrummet där jag hade egen ingång. Vi tog av oss ytterkläderna och eftersom vi var igång så fortsatte vi att ta av oss andra också. Och sängen jag hade var rätt smal. För att få plats där kunde man inte ens ligga bredvid varandra. Vilket ju i denna gång var en stor fördel. Men det där var på 20-talet väldigt skuldbelagt. Man visste inte riktigt vad det rörde sig om. Det fanns ingen som helst skolundervisning om detta. Man trodde nästan på den tiden att en flicka kunde bli med barn genom brevväxling. De talade om hur man kunde fastna i varandra. Och de hade berättat att det hände att om man tog en oskuld kunde blödningen fortsätta så kraftigt att man var tvungen att åka till sjukhus under hopsyd. Det tyckte jag var otäckt. Men hela upplevelsen som hade börjat var så stark. Detta medförde att det jagade bort all rädsla. Vi var samtidigt nämligen väldigt, vad man enkelt uttryck kan säga, rädda om varandra. Vi tänkte hela tiden på detta att det skulle gå bra. Och det gjorde det. Så det blev en sen vårväckelse, en tidig vårmorgon. Och luften som kom in var ju som att man grönskan, trädbladen, de var så fantastiska. Och himlen var så röd. Vi stod bara och höll om varandras axlar och vi stod alldeles tysta. Då vi gick Norrtullsgatan och jag såg alla dessa bruna och gråa hus, så sken de nu som palats och spårvagnarna flög förbi i underbara färger, blanka. Vilken färg vet jag inte, men bara att det var en som var så enastående. För första gången i mitt liv så kände jag ju att jag kände mig helt inom mig. Jag tror att jag tänkte att det här kommer jag aldrig i mitt liv att glömma. Och det gjorde jag inte.
Yeah, so that's unfortunately that was the only positive. I think we interviewed about 30 people about their first time experience, and this was really the only positive story we got. So, and that is kind of also, I guess, brings us again. I said my reason or my perceived reasons for making animated documentaries have changed a bit. And after making this film, I felt like, yeah, but maybe rather than opening a window, because that's really something personal for me, maybe the justification is that you can take a difficult story and you can package it in a way through animation, because animation might make it feel a bit more innocent. It's easier for the audience to take in, even if the story is difficult. So it's maybe as if you have a razor, a knife, and you want people to swallow it, you put it in a nice piece of pastry of a piece of cake or something, and then you can get people to swallow it without realizing what they're eating. So that was how my kind of justification changed. You can sell the audience difficult stories through animation, and maybe that's true, I don't know. Another thing, because this was very new to me, like basing stuff on documentary material, that became kind of a selling point of the film as well, like based on a true story kind of thing. So I got super paranoid about these stories, and what if they're not true? What if they're actually lying, these people, when they tell the stories? So actually for some of the stories we went back, did more and more interviews just to make sure they were telling the same story, because it felt like it was too good to be true. So that brought me to the next animated documentary I made, which is called Lies, because I thought, okay, let's avoid this problem. If we make a film about telling lies, it doesn't really matter if the people telling those stories are lying. That just adds another layer to it, so we don't really need to worry. So that was the film you saw a part of at the beginning of the presentation. And that again consisted of several stories on the same subject. And really after having made that, I thought, well, maybe that's the reason. Maybe the justification is like, we all have stories to tell, and each person had more than one story, obviously. So there are billions of stories out there that are good stories, that are worth telling, that are worth serving to an audience. So maybe these films are just a way of collecting a little tiny section of all the stories that are out there and handing them to an audience and packaging them. Maybe I'm the guy who wraps them up in a package and just hands over these stories. So yeah, maybe that's a good reason for making animated documentaries. The next animated documentary, I'm just going to show you the trailer for it. We made a film called Tussilago. It's about a terrorist affair that happened in Stockholm in the 70s. Some people planned to kidnap a politician. They never succeeded in doing that, but it was big on the news at the time. And the weird thing was that where they planned to keep this politician in prison was in a basement in the city of Stockholm, and they put up a sign in the window of that basement saying animation studio. And that sign was there for many years afterwards. And by coincidence, with our company FilmTecknarna, we moved into the house next door and put up a sign saying animation studio. So I always kind of wonder what the neighbors were actually thinking we were doing in there. So I thought maybe we do the animated film about this story that they didn't do down there. Then I started reading about it and realized that one of the people involved was actually an animator who was doing animation as well down in that basement, and I knew very well who he was, so maybe that was a bad starting point. But reading these stories, I found that there was like one person, the girlfriend of this German terrorist at the center of this. Her story really stood out as a personal story, and something that went beyond just being about crime or terrorism, but actually about relationships, etc. So let's look at the trailer for this one. Now, when making this film, I was very preoccupied with how do you treat the subject of terrorism, even if they never managed to do more than rob a few banks. It's still kind of a sensitive subject. I did very much want to avoid treating it as the cliches would be in films, like either they're romantic rebels or they're murder machines, and either way you kind of make them larger than life. And these are really small, it's a small story in a sense, and I wanted to make them as small as they were in real life. Not only did they rob banks, they built ships out of matches and fought like any couple did. So I really wanted to kind of take it away from that kind of film cliche and just show them as the people I think they were. But the weird thing that I found when we started interviewing her was that even if I wanted to avoid movie cliches, they were actually modeling themselves on popular culture. So this German terrorist guy, he was really into spaghetti westerns and Charles Bronson movies, and they were kind of seeing themselves as Bonnie and Clyde, etc. So they were actually, in a way, creating themselves as characters, as cliches from popular culture, and I was trying to tell the story from the other way. And that kind of led me to think again about this animated documentary concept. Maybe the justification or the essence of animated documentary is in those two words, animated and documentary. They don't really fit together at all. Like animated, that's all fake, isn't it? You create something, you create life where there isn't any life. It's all a fake art form in that sense, whereas documentary should imply you're looking at reality, you're looking through a window at reality, etc. But coming to think of it, like for one thing, doing these interview films, for this one, for example, I had 6 hours of interviews. The film is 13 minutes. I have a lot of power just by editing those interviews into what kind of story in the end it will turn into. It could be any story, really. And obviously the people interviewed are aware of being interviewed, so they might tell their story in a different way. That's not true. They might not even remember what happened. And I thought this is true of any documentary. Like, they look like they're a window into reality. Even a fly-on-the-wall documentary where the camera seems to be not present and the people in the film are not aware of the camera, it's still like everyone is acting because they know they're in a documentary. It's always edited, and someone chose where the camera looks, where to place the camera. So in the end, it's all going to be, yes, in some way we're looking at reality, but it's always going to be filtered through the artist's or the director's or editor's mind and conception of what the film is supposed to be, what is the story we're telling. And in a way, I thought this animated documentary thing, which is really seems to be an impossible combination of words, maybe that's the most honest form of documentary, because to be honest, when you look at these films, like you see animated characters, you know you're not looking at reality, and still you have to ask yourself the question, what is real behind this, what is true, what is the actual reality behind this facade of animated characters that act out these stories. And maybe that's how any documentary should be. Start by asking the question of, what am I as an artwork? Am I the truth? Am I a reality? Or am I just like any piece of artwork? So I guess that's my current notion of what the animated documentary is anyway. On the other hand, you can justify making animated documentaries and doing it in a specific animation style in other ways as well. Just one last example, which is the latest animated documentary we made, which is about people who are addicted to computer games.
Alltså jag är den första i vår släkt som tar student. Mitt studentfirande innebar att min pappa hade gjort en smörgåstårta och mina föräldrar sa till mig att ja, din jävla nåla, du ska inte tro att det är. Och när man då lyckas med någonting i den här världen så känner man att, men oj, jag är här.
Jag var 7 år när jag började spela datorspel. Då satte jag mig med mormors dator och körde platsen om Windows. Sen så fick jag min egna dator när jag var 10 år. Då satt jag väldigt mycket hemma själv och spelade.
Vi satt vid ett databord med ryggen mot varandra. Det kanske var en meter mellan våra kroppar, om man säger så.
Ja, jag var så inne i min spelvärld så att jag märkte inte att min före detta fru hade ett förhållande med den här mamman.
Det är ju ingen här längre. Magin har försvunnit, allt det här roliga var, nej, det här suger verkligen. Så jag stänger ner det.
Yeah. So that, again, obviously that's one way of justifying using animation. These people are people who treat what is essentially an animated world as more real than this other world that we normally see as reality. So here's an obvious choice to use animation, obviously, to make it look like a game. And these are all based loosely on the characters they played in the games, but far away enough to not be copyright infringements. The lady in the film actually played a Wookiee in some sort of Star Wars game, so thence the furry appearance. So I guess this concludes my collection of clips and maybe also my talking without being provoked by questions. So if we have any questions.
But Jonas, this was great to hear also like your story, which it's apparent. It seems like it was really full of coincidences. So in a way, like you were telling us, especially at the beginning, like some coincidences, and you never planned in a way that you were not taught as an animator. You didn't went to
No. I have no education whatsoever. So, and probably if you asked me when I was 18, I wouldn't have planned a life of making animation. Mm-hmm. No way. No.
But somehow you got stuck to it because
I got stuck. Yeah. Still here.
And nowadays everybody's talking about feature animation film. There is a lot of money, I'm sure in Sweden it's allocated as well. But you never...
I haven't, I mean, I've had a couple of feature projects that we tried to get off the ground, but they haven't actually been animation, I'm afraid to say.
So fiction?
Sorry.
Fiction?
Yeah, live action stuff, so, but no luck so far.
So you were explaining also like this life of a commissioned artist working with Nexus in London, so going up and down, and at a certain point, like you have enough of this kind of like, or you still it's bringing economical resources to you that you still have to do it in a way, or like being stuck with the commercial world, like with the agency problem. Maybe you establish a good relation with them because like you are. How to say, like an important artist, but sometimes don't you feel that it's too much what they are expecting and the way they are dealing with and on a, how to say, like exploiting everybody and everything just to sell more of their products?
Yeah, I mean, as a member of the jury looking through some of the competition programs, I noticed the theme of sadomasochism has been prominent in some of the films, and I guess doing commercials has an element of that. It has an element of painfulness and humiliation that, the ones I showed you here was probably the most painless projects I worked on, and it's still like you still need to work hard, etc. But there were at least there was no humiliation involved, at least not of me. I don't know. But yes, I mean sometimes you get tired of it. At the same time, I because most of it, even if you make a short film, you commit yourself to quite a long time working on that film. So just the fact that you do something, you do a project that takes a month or something, it is sort of worthwhile just to see that you're actually making something that becomes something rather than working on the same film for years and waiting to see some result that actually reaches an audience. So from that point of view, not only from the economical point of view, but also from the point of view of actually making, because I like making stuff. It's not just telling stories, but I also like just to, you make something and I could be making chairs at home or something, but maybe, yeah, pays more to do commercials.
With music clips, were you or are you in a position to choose the music that you like, or it's a market thing, so you are there and they call you and they ask you want to do this band?
Yeah, I mean you can choose to say yes or no, and there's not much money involved, so the reason is never the money to say yes. Anyway, it's more about like, do you like this artist, do you like this track, etc. So I still get sent sometimes tracks, but it's hard to kind of fit that in, because on the one hand there's no money, on the other hand there's no time either. So you need to kind of then commit to do a very dive into a very intensive project during a few weeks, and then you need to know that those weeks are free, and it's quite hard to plan that way.
Are you a team worker? Because like as you were explaining with FilmTecknarna, you were many directors, and then suddenly you stayed on your own.
Yeah.
So it's like you mind working with other people if you would have like a bigger project, and on your short animated documentaries, are you hiring somebody or are you working with somebody else?
Yeah. I mean, I think film in general is a team effort. And that's what's fun about it as well. I wouldn't want to be a person who does everything himself, like sits for 5 years and does every little bit of it, because it's I mean, people bring something to the project that I try to work like more like a live action director would, like you direct and that's what you do, but I mean, you wind up doing a lot of other things yourself as well for various reasons, lack of money or just a wish to control everything, maybe.
So like working with a small team of steady collaborator, or in your case?
Yeah, it's usually there's like a set of usual suspects that we would normally work with, yeah.
Anybody? Well, even Piotr, if you have one.
Yeah.
Czaki, Milanka,
it is professional, but not maybe related to animation, but the way I observe you, you sort of radiate a certain wisdom and calm throughout everything. Is it something that you have always been like that? Or is it just this sense of content, let's say, satisfaction that you get through crystallizing every next hunger or ambition through your work, which is, let's say, psychological ambition? Actually, you say, okay, I've observed certain, let's say, tendencies in my field and I wanted to go over it. I've been disappointed through, I don't know what's been happening, so my next hunger is to go into documentaries. Is it something that flows between you and your work, or are you just so composed as a person since forever?
I don't know. I'm not sure what radiates wisdom. The films or
the entire package. You and your work. It seems like you're
okay.
one. Is it just? Is there a secret formula?
I'm here with my work. So in a sense, when I sit here, I am my work. I might have other areas of less wise things, but yeah, I try to be wise when I represent the work, maybe. I don't know.
Well done, then.
Thank you.
You do yoga? I mean, at this point...
No, I smoke. That's what I do.
Good.
I think everyone has seen that here.
Actually, what Milanka asked, yeah, it's like... but then cinema is your only commercial and authorial, is your only field of work? Or is there something hidden that we don't know that you still do for as a hobby or for professionally? I don't think so, no? So cinema.
Work as in?
As work, as labor, as...
I don't know. I mean, it's within the field of personal films, music videos, commercials, but also I've done television graphics, for example, and we're also involved, I'm now involved kind of in some very vague capacities in a drama documentary series that's made for television in Sweden, where I do a bit of visual stuff, and I go out and direct some of the shots and things like that. So, but that's still within the same field, I guess.
Okay. You started quite early, no? We realized, and you didn't mention MTV. There was nothing that you, because at that time when you started, also they were starting up their.
Yeah, I mean, we started before MTV, but yeah, I mean, that was something that we had already kind of come so far, so we had a chance to go to festivals and stuff and see a lot of different kinds of animation. But I guess MTV in the 80s showed that kind of animation to a general audience. Like you would have short interstitials by Jan Schwankmeyer or whatever, the people you would see films from at the major festivals. MTV would package that in little bite-sized pieces and show that to a general young audience. So I think that did change the general audience's attitude towards animation. They suddenly saw it could be a lot of different things. So it did affect us indirectly, yes. And then we did work for a while. We did a lot of kind of graphics and stuff for MTV. Like things like that.
Do you ever teach or give workshops?
I try to say no to things like being on juries on festivals and stuff like that, because people call you 1 year ahead and ask, can you come that week? And it seems like a great idea a year before, and then when it gets closer, there's always some other work you need to do. So I've been doing a bit of teaching, but then it's with schools that I could do a deal like, okay, can you call me like 2 weeks before, and then we can, decide something. So it's more like guest teaching.
Yeah. In Sweden or?
In Sweden, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anybody more? How is it like? We were just talking. It seems like Sweden is such a great country, social welfare state, and everything. A lot of cinema going on, but with autorial animation, there is not much happening. We mentioned Nikki Lindroth van Beer, that it's the next author, but being her alone as well and doing her own things. You're there. So why there is no bigger community for animation, or you gave it a thought?
Yeah, I did. For one thing, we don't really have a long tradition. Like there was like some quite advanced animation made very early on, like in the 1910s, 1920s. Yeah, Victor Bergdahl and some others as well. And then there was nothing until the 60s. So I think we don't have a long tradition, and we haven't had, like when I started out, there was no education for animation and stuff like that. So that's quite recent. And I think there's been like then independent animators doing short films. There's been now and then. There's been a few kind of people doing feature films, like Per Olin was a great illustrator and designer who also made a number of animated features. And now the main kind of focus in terms of larger productions is on well-known children's book properties, basically like something they know that can sell, and usually kind of maybe not as well thought out in design and concept as what we saw from Riga earlier here, for example. It is more like fast productions that kind of are based on well-known books that they know kids are going to go and see in the cinema.
So this is the Swedish Film Institute direction, in a way, like they...
It's not really the Swedish Film Institute. The Swedish Film Institute is, the way the financing works in Sweden is like the Swedish Film Institute, yeah, they put a lot of money into film, but they're not allowed to fully finance a film. It always needs to be like other economical interest in it as well. So that means like you can't do a film that's completely independent in the sense that you only have Film Institute money that kind of has no commercial expectations attached. So that means like you need to be sure that you get your money back somehow. And the other thing I think is because there is no long tradition of art house animation. There's just like these, like if you compare with football, like you have like Zlatan is a great player, but it's not like you have tons of good teams. So it's the same, I guess. Like Nicky would be the Zlatan of animation maybe, or something like, but the national team might not go as far.
We should mention Max Andersson as well. Okay, he escaped to Berlin from Stockholm and doing his own things. Mainly in comics, but also I think that. Okay, so if not, I think that really we go to lunch. We have to eat something, and we see.